You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the politics editor for Gal-dem, Moya Lothian Mclean, and the Times' Home Affairs editor, Dathan. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. The Observer quotes the Archbishop of Canterbury, describing the government's plans to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda as against the judgment of God. Justin Welby's words are also the main story for the Sunday Telegraph, reporting that some victims of the Rwandan genocide stand to lose their homes in order to accommodate migrants sent away from Britain. The Sunday Mirror dubs the Home Secretary pretty heartless, after she and a number of other high-profile UK politicians were banned from Russia. Scotland's Sunday National hears from First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, who says Putin is a war criminal, and I will not shy away from condemning him and his regime. The Sunday Times reports that the epilepsy drug sodium valproate is still being prescribed to pregnant women, despite findings that it caused birth defects and disabilities in as many as 20,000 babies. The Sunday Express is unhappy with environmental and anti-oil protest groups who've been blocking roads recently, demanding punish eco-mob now. And The Star has a story concerning a former actor on the 1980s sitcom Heidi High. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Moya Lothian Mclean and Dathan. Welcome to you both. Let's start by having a look at The Observer, and this is the Archbishop of Canterbury's statements regarding the Rwanda plan, as we'll call it. Very, very critical. Moya.
Yes, indeed. So Justin Welby, who is, of course, the head of the Church of England, has made a drastic intervention using his Easter Sunday sermon, which, as I think anyone who's familiar with the Christian faith will know that this is a big deal, to criticise the plan of sending asylum seekers about 4,000 miles away from the UK to be processed, which has been widely condemned by human rights and NGOs and government ministers alike.
Matt, this is quite some intervention by Justin Welby, isn't it? I mean, he's not sitting on the fence at all here, saying it's against the judgment of God.
No, absolutely not. It's quite extraordinary, actually, the intervention coming on Easter Sunday, his Easter Sunday sermon. And I think one of the papers report that number 10 were very much taken by surprise. And I think the fact that the Home Office statement that you just read out had to be issued so quickly after the front pages have dropped from a Home Office that doesn't really react too quickly to breaking stories out of experience is reflective of how stunned, I think, government officials and government ministers will be at this incredibly scathing intervention. I mean, it says it goes against Britain's responsibility as a country formed by Christian values, very much using religion to attack these plans. And I think it will cause all kinds of rows this week as MPs return to Parliament this week. It's going to dominate the headlines again, I think.
Yes, and I'll just read that full Home Office statement to put it in context. It begins, the UK has a proud history of supporting those in need of protection, and our resettlement programmes have provided safe and legal routes to better futures for hundreds of thousands of people across the globe. However, the world is facing a global migration crisis on an unprecedented scale, and change is needed to prevent vile people smugglers putting people's lives at risk and to fix the broken global asylum system. Rwanda is a fundamentally safe and secure country with a track record of supporting asylum seekers. Under this agreement, they will process claims in accordance with the UN Refugee Convention, national and international human rights laws. But this is a point in which many are saying that it does actually contravene international laws. Moya.
Yes, indeed. The plans have been deemed illegal. There is serious concerns raised about how workable they would even be if found to be legal, which many expect they're not going to be. And most of all, it says a lot that there's been a concerted sort of condemnation, not just from people within the government, not just from the Home Office, which was reported yesterday that there's potential mutiny from Home Office staff. Priti Patel had to issue a ministerial directive to overrule objections, which I think is the second to be issued from the minister in charge of the Home Office in 30 years. But there's also now this sort of moral objection from the clergy. And this is not the first time that we've seen Justin Welby intervene specifically to do with the current government's policies. We saw him, I think, condemn the rule of six and household mixing in September 2020 and how it was being implemented by Mr. Johnson. But I've also seen other clergy condemn the increasingly hostile environment that's being directed by Priti Patel. I was at a Southwark Cathedral Christmas address, and the staff there, which was attended by the Mayor of London, and the the clergy there also used that to condemn the sort of increasing hostility towards asylum seekers and refugees. So this is not the first time we're seeing this, and it also seems to be part of a wider concern on the part of the clergy at the way that Britain's welcome mat is being taken away, as it were.
Yes, and in the Sunday Telegraph, moving on to that paper, we hear further detail of the upcoming sermon, with Justin Welby actually saying that the plan is ungodly, and yet we read it in the article that the first migrants are expected to leave the UK for Rwanda on chartered flights as soon as next month. Yes, that's right. I think that's very much an ambition. Boris Johnson very much wants to appear before next month's local elections that the government is taking action, because they are getting criticised from the right wing at the failure to combat the growing numbers of people coming across the channel in small boats. And I think the Home Office, however, the officials talking to them in the last week are more realistic. They're saying because of the number of legal challenges that it's unlikely that we'll see any kind of huge numbers of people going there this year. I think there may be a small number of flights in the next few months, and that will enable the Home Office and Number 10 to show voters and to show the public that they are taking action. But I don't think even Rwanda is ready to take the tens of thousands that Boris Johnson talked about over the next few years. Yes, and we move on to this story in the Mirror, which, if entirely true, is shocking. Orphans of the Rwandan genocide could lose their homes to make way for refugees, well, the article says, being booted out of Britain. That is shocking, if true, Moya.
Yeah, so this is an investigation by the Mirror, which found that the Hope House Hotel, which was featured in the press tour that Priti Patel went on as a potential home for asylum seekers who would be sent to Rwanda under details of the proposed scheme. Currently, that hotel was occupied by about 20 orphans of Rwanda's civil war and genocide who have been living there since they lost their parents. And many of them have no money, they have no family. Apparently, some face lifelong mental health battles. And it seems particularly ironic, that it's called Hope Hotel, but also that, traumatized people who have nowhere else to go are, again, being kicked out of this building in order to make room for other traumatized people who have nowhere to go. It just simply doesn't make sense. And add on to that the other details of this plan. It will cost about, apparently, a predicted 20,000 to 30,000 for each person. It will cost Britain, the taxpayer, each person who is sent to Rwanda to be protested. That is how much it will be. So even if you didn't oppose these plans on a human level, which I think everybody should, the plan for the financial level just don't make sense for people who are concerned already about the cost of immigration, because they will be paying more for these people to be sent elsewhere.
Matt, your thoughts on that this scheme actually could end up costing a lot more than it might do to actually implement infrastructure to receive refugees in this country?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's costing around about £1.5 billion, the current asylum system in the UK. But I mean, I was on that trip to Rwanda, and Priti Patel and the officials were very, they were very honest and said that the costs will go up. The costs of this policy to start with will be costly. We've estimated it, and we've heard that it's going to be around about £20,000 to £30,000 per person. But the hope is, from their view, is that over time, this will deter people coming across the channel in small boats, and then therefore the number of people that the UK is having to accommodate, asylum seekers to accommodate and put through the system, and also remove to Rwanda and other countries will go down. So over time, it will actually reduce the numbers. I was actually at that Hope hostel that the Mirror talks about, and I'm quite surprised by that story, because that hostel was actually it's a privately owned hostel at the moment, it's just used as a normal tourist hostel. And actually, the Rwandan government haven't actually signed a deal with the private owners yet. So it's not actually even ready to take people from the UK, despite the fact that Boris Johnson and Priti Patel wants the flights to start flying from next month.
But from what you could ascertain, is Rwanda equipped to take these people into their country when they are actually a country still healing themselves from the genocide and have very many vulnerable people themselves that they have to cater for?
I actually do think they are ready to take refugees. They've currently they have taken 130,000 since the Rwandan genocide from other countries, and they have a proud record of taking refugees from other countries. However, they are certainly not equipped to take the volume of asylum seekers from the UK that Boris Johnson was talking about. I mean, tens of thousands is just absolutely not realistic at all. And of course, if you're taking that number of people, you're going to have to make room, and that will mean that other people are going to have to make room for them, like the Daily Mirror suggests. So they maybe might be able to take in the hundreds or low thousands, but definitely not in the tens of thousands.
Looking at the revenge attacks from Russia. This is following the sinking of the Black Sea flagship, the Moskva, despite them claiming that it was nothing to do with Ukrainian attacks on the ship. But Moya, take us into this.
Yes, so there have been, as expected, so-called revenge attacks on key targets in the north, in Kiev and Kharkiv, particularly an attack on a Kiev arms plant, which was apparently the site where one of the missiles which sunk Moskva came from. But it's caused a bit of alarm because it's reminded Ukrainians that even though Russia has withdrawn from these northern territories, they still are capable of long-range attacks with sea-based missiles. So basically, nowhere is safe, but it's a sad reminder that Russia may not be physically present in the region anymore, but they still can reach it.
Yes, and frightening that they're launching attacks in areas where civilians might have thought that it was now slightly safer. It just goes to show that nowhere's safe in Ukraine. Matt.
No, absolutely not, and it's quite depressing to read the mayor of Kyiv, Vitaly Klitschko, warning people who are thinking about returning to actually stay away. We've been seeing on our TV screens over the last few days that the streets of Kyiv returning not to normal by any means, but at least citizens returning there. And there was obviously Boris Johnson, that even he visited, was it last weekend, was it? So it was quite depressing to see that actually it's going to be quite unpredictable for citizens in Ukraine about where Ukraine are going to hit.
Let's move to the Observer, and as we trailed Partygate, still talking about it, and the question now, is it going to hurt the Conservatives in the upcoming elections? Moya.
Well, I mean, the predictions thus far seem to suggest yes, but again, predictions often wrong. The Telegraph ran reports yesterday of two polls which predicted Tory losses of 800 seats, which sounds a lot. The Telegraph was clearly quite alarmed at this and said, if this happens in a general election, Keir Starmer could become Prime Minister. So the senior Tory MPs are still very concerned about the damage that Partygate is doing to the base. The Observer is quoting Caroline Noakes, who will have a letter in the Observer tomorrow, where she says that she hasn't withdrawn her letter of no confidence in Boris Johnson and that she's still getting concerted emails from her constituents, most of them long-term Tory supporters, who are just absolutely appalled at what's happened. The real question is if more fines are to come, which, as predicted, apparently, there's about 3 to 6 fines on the horizon for Boris Johnson. So the question is now that will he be able to hang on throughout that, or will the sort of momentum build to the point where more letters of no confidence are submitted if more of the Tory base do react equally strongly to these consecutive fines.
Yes, and that is the point, Matt, isn't it? The Conservative MPs across the country believe that many people who backed the party previously, if more fines land on the doorstep of the Prime Minister, then his position becomes untenable. Or certainly with those voters, they are going to think twice.
Yeah, I actually think these fines have come at the terrible, worst time for the Prime Minister. A lot of people were questioning the timing last week, weren't they? It's very convenient it came during the Easter holidays, MPs are away. But actually, if you think about it, the local elections are sort of 2 weeks away. He's probably going to be fined again before then. And I think the more the Partygate is in the news in the run-up to those polls, the more damaging it will be for the Conservatives. And I think, although we're not really seeing the numbers we saw before of Tory MPs coming out and saying they're going to submit letters of no confidence, I think the crunch point will come after those May elections in a couple of weeks. And if the Tories are severely damaged, I think a lot more Tory MPs will think about submitting that crucial letter of no confidence.
Yes, we shall see, indeed. Matt and Moya, thank you so much for taking us through the papers.